So one of the things that is directly related to what we talked about with Barry is the fact that the sheriff said, hey, you know what, this super sanctuary county thing, I'm not playing that game. Okay. And I want to make sure that people fully understand exactly what happened there. Because what they think happened, what I've seen, what people think happened, that's not exactly what happened. But basically the county said, hey, you know what, law enforcement isn't going to cooperate with the deportation of illegal immigrants, specifically dangerous illegal immigrants. In other words, illegal immigrants who are here and have committed some kind of violent crime. So let's talk about exactly what was going on there. But first, let's watch this video that explains the situation a little.
It's a showdown in San Diego as elected officials there are at odds over how much they should cooperate with the incoming Trump administration's mass deportation plan. San Diego County supervisors voted 3-1 Tuesday to make San Diego a so-called super sanctuary county. The new policy would prohibit its sheriff's department from working with ICE and federal authorities to deport migrants, even when migrants are in custody for committing crimes. Current state sanctuary law makes exceptions for local and federal authorities to cooperate in cases of migrants committing violent crimes. The San Diego County Sheriff says she will defy the new policy while continuing to follow state law. Nora Vargas, a county supervisor who brought forth the proposal to not allow federal and local cooperation in deportations, said we will not allow our local resources to be used for actions that separate families, harm community trust, or divert critical local resources away from addressing our most pressing challenges. Another supervisor who voted for its passage argued residents are less likely to report crimes if they believe that person could get deported, resulting in a family separated. The only supervisor who voted against it argued the policy is protecting criminals, not San Diego residents and law-abiding migrants.
Making sure that people know that they can report crimes to the sheriff and that they don't need to be concerned that that's going to immediately trigger deportation strongly outweighs any potential concerns.
This proposed legislation, to me, seeks to prioritize the interest of illegal criminal immigrants over the safety of law-abiding immigrants and citizens. I don't think we can continue down this path.
After the proposal passed, the sheriff, a Democrat, responded, saying the Board of Supervisors does not set policy for the sheriff's office. The sheriff, as an independently elected official, sets the policy for the sheriff's office. State law allows for the sheriff's office to share release dates for individuals who are in sheriff's custody only if they have qualifying convictions for specific serious, violent, or sex crimes. The sheriff isn't the only elected official to speak out against the new policy. A local mayor in San Diego County is also publicly voicing his opposition in a video message on X.
This is really super tone deaf if you consider what just happened in the last election. Most of America wants.
Okay, that was Bill Wells, who's an awesome Second Amendment guy. He's the mayor of El Cajon. But really what I wanted to focus on was what the sheriff said and what they're saying. First, Tara Lawson-Raymer, who's horrible at her job and unfortunately just got reelected, she kind of did this whole scare tactic of like, well, gee, people are going to stop reporting crimes if they're afraid they're going to get deported. That's not, first off, she doesn't care about that. She's anti-cop. She's defund the police. She's a lunatic. She doesn't actually care about that. She's trying to pull at people's heartstrings. The actual function here is if someone gets arrested for a major violent crime, like, assault, sexual assault, something like that, and they're being booked into jails, then the sheriff's office has the ability, and in fact, the way the state's law is written, it's kind of the duty to say, hey, this person's also here illegally so that the federal government can go ahead and deport them. Why would she do that? Well, there's a lot of reasons she would do that. She doesn't want to fill her jails. She doesn't have enough jail space as it is, So the ability to say, hey, you know what, this person broke a lot of laws, but they also broke a federal law, which is, they're here illegally. So let's turn them over to the federal government. So the federal government's they're the responsibility of the federal government. So somebody in custody that just raped somebody isn't going to fear reporting illegal activity because they might get deported. That doesn't make any sense, Tara Lawson Raymer. You're completely pulling things out of your whatever. So, I mean, she's just so horrible at her job. It's ridiculous. So I wanted to read the press release real quick. Today, Sheriff Kelly A. Martinez issued the following statement, and she did a little bit deeper dive, which we're not going to really go into. Related to Chairman Vargas's board letter on adopting a board policy on immigration enforcement. The sheriff respects Chairman Vargas and the members of the Board of Supervisors. However, she has been clear on her position on this matter. As stated in the sheriff's statement, she will continue to follow state law, and there is no loophole in state statute as referenced in the chairman's board letter. Current state law strikes the right balance between limiting local law enforcement's cooperation with immigration authorities, ensuring public safety, and building community trust. Basically, she said, let me keep going. State law allows for the sheriff's office to share release dates for individuals who are in sheriff's custody only if they have qualifying convictions for specific serious, violent, or sex crimes. That's Government Code 7282.5. It gives the authority for law enforcement to cooperate with immigration authorities as prescribed, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so it's basically the county board. She's not even defying. The county board is saying, hey, here's what we want you to do. And the sheriff is saying, that's not what we do. I mean, it would be like if the county board, went to, went to a Miramax and said, here's the movie we want you to make. And they defied law by not making the movie. No, they don't have any authority to do that. The county board of supervisors has nothing to do. They can't make the sheriff override state law, and they certainly have nothing to do with her policies. But the policy here is right in line with state law. So, the sheriff is basically saying, hey, look, we're going to continue to follow the law. That's what we're going to do. You guys go have your political fight, make your political messages, whatever. We're going to follow the law. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important. Number one, by the way, the county board, you're not going to see them say, hey, local law enforcement, sheriff's office, we no longer want you enforcing federal gun laws, right? They're not going to do that. So they're not against the concept of law enforcement, enforcing federal law or state law. It's not a philosophical thing for them. It's not like there's some kind of principle that they're standing on. They're not worried that, hey, gosh, golly, gun owners aren't going to report crimes if they think that their federal laws will be enforced. No, they're completely, full of it when they try to paint this picture that it's unethical or wrong or, think of the children or whatever their stupid argument is. But the other side is the sheriff's side. And I think we need to be consistent too. So the sheriff is saying, look, I'm going to follow the law. And I think that's exactly what you want in a sheriff. That's what she portrayed. That's the sheriff she portrayed she would be when she ran. And frankly, trying to get a sheriff or any law enforcement officer to not follow the law is not the way you push back against laws, whether they're laws you dislike or laws that are unconstitutional. That's not the American way. There are many avenues. You can go to the courts. You can get, people elected in California. You can even, you have the proposition route you can take. But trying to, if a law passes, representatives, sign a law into being, and your solution is to get the law enforcement officer to not follow that law, it's delusional. It's never going to happen. It never has happened. And it's frankly un-American. That's not the American system. From day one with San Diego County gun owners have said, hey, comply, but work to change the laws. And we've done that. We've shown that it can happen. but not complying with the law doesn't make you a tough guy, and expecting a law enforcement officer to put everything on the line to not enforce a law that you disagree with while you're sitting there behind your computer. You know what I mean? So what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is there are going to be times, there have been times when the sheriff's department has enforced laws that I don't like, that I think are unconstitutional, that maybe are constitutional, but I disapprove of them. And what is never going to be the solution is for me to try to convince law enforcement to not enforce those laws. So if we're saying that about the other side when they talk about immigration, we have to be consistent and say that about everything across the board, whether it's gun laws or not. So all the sheriff is saying is, I'm going to continue to follow the law, and this opinion piece that the county board has issued, isn't the law. That's not how this works. They don't have the authority. That's not how policy is put in place. And my policy follows state law. I'm enforcing state law. I'm enforcing federal law by going through state law. Is in fact what it is. I think that's an extremely important point to make. Before I go on, I want to talk about the county board and the makeup, because I think there's a misunderstanding of the history of the county board too. Before I do, Alicia, what are your thoughts so far?
As you're making those statements, I agree. But I actually had a thought, and that's something that we've never discussed, so I don't know where you stand, and I'm curious. You're discussing. It's kind of taking the same concept of the larger entity having a stand, and then a smaller entity attempting to kind of change that. I'm curious, federally, and if you don't want to go into this now, let me know.
No.
I'm curious. Federally, marijuana. Illegal.
Yeah.
State, California.
Yep.
Right? I'm curious kind of, because as you're making the statements you're making, in my mind, I kind of kept it coming back to that. Federally, it's still illegal.
Yep.
California is choosing not to put manpower, money, funding into enforcement.
Right.
So I'm curious, where you fall on that.
We've talked about it from a gun owner's point of view, and something has to get done. And the problem with marijuana and guns, because right now it is legal to buy and use marijuana.
Depending on the agency you're interacting with.
Well, what I'm saying is there are stores,
Correct.
like
correct.
in strip malls,
Right,
where
right.
you can walk in and buy marijuana. You can buy gummies and whatever.
But don't take it through a Border Patrol checkpoint.
Right, but
Right.
but you can buy it. You can a seller can go get a permit. They can set up shop. It's not under the table. It's all out and So because the state of California has said Now, if you are a gun owner, you are technically committing a felony if you're using marijuana.
Because your background check is a federal check.
Right. And when now they did just change, they took a minor step and they changed marijuana to a different classification. But here's the problem. The problem is Republicans hate pot and Democrats hate guns.
Right.
So neither one of them are doing anything useful on this. They're both deciding to be hypocrites. Something has to happen. Now there's been a case, there's been a federal case. A lady tried to use her medical marijuana card. This was in Nevada, as a form of ID to buy a gun. And basically, and the court said, look, they went in and said, well, she's not using it. She just has this medical marijuana card. And the court said, look, if she's got a medical marijuana card, it's a pretty easy leap to believe that she's a user of this, of these drugs. So what I think needs to happen is, not complying with the law is not an option. What we need to do is work towards fixing this. And the way you fix it is through Congress. Congress needs to fix this. Republicans are all about guns. Okay, well, help us. Now you've got control of Congress, meaning the Senate and the House of Representatives. You have Trump in the White House. You have the Supreme Court. So show us just how supportive you are of gun owners and help us out here not get arrested because somebody's taking some kind of gummy for sleep or whatever. I don't care. I don't know. I don't know what they do. Who cares? But show us now that you can responsibly use government more so than Democrats and help gun owners out. So, and that's the point I want to make, is this whole, and we even talked about it with open carry versus CCW at the beginning of the show. This whole non-compliance, like I'm just going to sit here and cross my arms and be pure of thought. That's, fine and dandy. But at the end of the day, what you have to do to change policy is change the policy.
Be active.
Not just decide like, well, gee golly, I just don't like it, so I'm going to sit here and do whatever. You know what I never notice? I never see people that are like, well, I'm not going to comply. I never see them not comply. You know what I mean? They leave some message on a post somewhere, but you don't see them proudly walking around saying, I'm not complying, because they're just as worried. They're just as afraid of being, serving time in a federal pen. But that's not what we do. It's not what we do here at Gun Owners Radio. It's not what we do at San Diego County Gun Owners or Orange County or Inland Empire. We file lawsuits. We get the right people elected. We take action. And our members, just by joining and saying, hey, I'm a part of this thing, I'm going to share their social media, I'm going to give $10 a month, whatever it is, that's exactly what you're doing. Non-compliance it's a cop-out. It's not moving the ball forward in any way. Now, there have been some talks. Let's talk about the County Board of Supervisors. So the County Board of Supervisors right now, as it stands, 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans. It used to be 5 Republicans. For about 30 years, 25, 30 years, it was the same Republicans. And I'm hearing people who didn't pay any attention to government until COVID talk about how there's this recent turn from conservative to progressive or from conservative to liberal when it comes to the county board. Well, when they had 5 Republicans on, it wasn't a conservative board. It wasn't a conservative board. And those who were paying attention to government, pre-COVID, back when there were the 5 sitting on there, know exactly what I'm talking about. There was on the kind of the coastal area where La Jolla is, there was a lady named Pam Slater, and she was nowhere near conservative. She was nowhere near conservative. In fact, after she was termed out and left, she turned into Pam Slater Price. That's what it was. She turned into a Democrat. She became a Democrat. She was pro-choice. She was not good on guns. She was very, very, in line with these extremists on the when it comes to environmentalism. She was very much considered herself a feminist. Kind of a radical feminist. Down south was a guy named Chris Cox, who's married to Cheryl Cox. She was the mayor of Chula Vista for a while. In no universe was Chris Cox a conservative. He was barely right of center. Now you could argue like, well, gee, Mike, he was representing a district that, isn't conservative, whatever. Okay, fine, but the decisions he made weren't conservative. The board wasn't conservative. Now there was a guy named Ron Roberts who kind of was the downtown guy, Point Loma, downtown. Ron Roberts was an interesting kind of a libertarian light, which made him very, very interesting. And you could tell he was doing his best to respect people's individual rights in kind of a, small L libertarian way. But I still wouldn't quite call him, conservative. I mean, he was right of center, unlike the other 2 that I mentioned. And then there was Diane Jacob, who's out east. Diane Jacob's not conservative, was not conservative. Mm-hmm. One of the last battles we fought before she rode off into the sunset was she was trying to stop shooting on federal lands.
Right.
Remember that?
Yep.
And we beat her, which I'm real happy about. I mean, she was hard to work with when it came to guns. She was also very, very kind of this extremist when it came to environmentalism. Not a conservative. Now, where I think they did some things right, it doesn't mean they were all wrong. It just means they weren't conservative. It's not like we had this conservative board for 30 years and then all of a sudden it started to turn progressive. That's not true. Some of the things they did right that maybe confused people for conservative is they were hyper-focused on making sure that the roads were paved.
Right.
Like you could tell once you left a city and you were going onto a county road, all of a sudden the potholes all disappeared, and they funded emergency services. They were extremely good at funding emergency services, and they balanced the budget. But I think they got too much credit for balancing the budget. I mean, we're talking about the 90s and the early 2000s. People's housing, was going through the roof. They had more money than they knew what to do with, So, but okay, fine. They balanced the budget. And of course, they're Republican. San Diego tended to be more Republican, so they got this rap of being conservative. Bill Horn, who is inland north, Bill Horn was a conservative.
Right.
Like, period. That dude was conservative. You go down the checklist, and he was absolutely conservative. But he was the only one. He was conservative, and Ron Roberts was kind of small L libertarian, and the other three were pretty left-leaning. They certainly weren't conservative in any sense of the word. Now, that's the other thing that makes it so tough, that I just hate labels, and I've just kind of gone so far away from labels. What is conservative? What's conservative? What's liberal? What's progressive? This year's conservative is next year's progressive. Last year's progressive is this year's conservative. It's you look at, like, I was having a conversation with somebody a couple months ago, one of our members, and he was saying, I'm kind of, a little bit on the left, a little bit on the right. And he talked about foreign policy. And he said, man, I want a tough military, and if somebody crosses us, we're going to go stomp them out. Okay, that's not conservative. That's not a conservative foreign policy. Maybe in the last couple decades it is, that maybe a lot of conservatives have picked that up and decided that's what it was. But if you're the type of person that wants a strong military and you want to go enforce the U.S.'s will on other people, welcome to the Democratic Party, liberal.
I wonder if you think of those statements, right?
Yeah.
So you speak of the military, you speak about defending rights and freedoms and
Right.
things like that. I mean, in some part, you can see patriotism in there,
Yep.
which patriotism and conservativeness, they tend to kind of come together.
Well,
but if you're talking about foreign policy, that's a different, right.
Right now they do.
Right.
In the 60s, I don't know if patriotism
Right.
and conservatism were on the same page.
Right.
I think it was
You're
very
right.
different. But as far as, we, especially before World War II, non-interventionism was the Republican way. And they were criticized for being isolationists. And then I think a lot of conservatives, served in the military, and it changed. Things changed. I think Ronald Reagan saber rattling, which worked
Right.
against the Soviets, I think things changed. But the point is, that's conservative, because when I was growing up, non-interventionism when foreign policy was conservative. The idea that we have this big, huge military and we go put troops on the ground, we go bomb people and we threaten them with war. That was as left wing as it came. That was Democrat foreign policy. And you talk about other issues, LGBT issues. Democrats were horrible on LGBT issues. The first openly gay elected official was Harvey Milk in San Francisco, and he was a Republican activist. So what's conservative here? What's liberal? What's left wing? What's right wing?
See, if you would have asked me before bringing up examples, my brain, and again, I think this is very unique, and I think that's why there's a lot of variables. Me, it goes, government, get out of my business.
Right.
For me, it's not about the military. It's not about war. That's not where my mind goes. For me, and I think there's. I mean, I'm curious what, like, Rich, what if you're to be asked, what's how do you define a conservative?
For me, I think it comes to the individual rights, So that's the way I was thinking about it as you guys were discussing it, is, what are the policies that advance individual freedoms, right, versus having an authoritarian, centralized state, controlling your life. And so. Look
at the individual rights to do drugs, because look at the way that both sides view law enforcement. Now we're pro back the blue, right? We're all about law enforcement. We want a strong sheriff and Wyatt Earp and blah 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 blah. Back in the 60s, law enforcement was the tool of the left, was the tool of Democrats. They would go and they would use law enforcement. against civil rights, against, you name it, and it was the Republicans, it was the right of center who said, hey, you know what, we don't like this strong law enforcement. We don't like an overbearing police force. That was definitely, a left of center or a Democrat idea. Now it's completely flipped. It's completely flipped. And it's kind of interesting. You look at the South, you look at the South's red, right? Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, they're red. That's Republican. Wasn't always, what happened was they used to be deep, deep blue from the Civil War to the 60s. They were deep, deep blue. In fact, if you go and look at some of their state government, many of their representatives, many of their local, state government, many of their city council members, many of their governors in these red states are very blue. It's very, very Democrat. What happened was in the 60s, there were a couple of different versions of the Civil Rights Act, but they finally passed the 1964 Civil Rights Act that basically said, hey, you can't discriminate. You have to do business with people no matter what their religion or their race or whatever it is. That was very, very much championed by the Republican Party, And what happened was the Democrats, it kind of turned them into it kind of split them apart. You had these New England Democrats, like the Kennedys, who were like, yeah, we got to stop this whole racism thing. And then you had the Southern Dixiecrats. They were like, no way, this is our tradition. We absolutely love Jim Crow laws. So what happened was the South kind of split its vote and started electing people like Nixon, and they were very unhappy with the Republican Party. But anyway, so once you got past that issue, once you got to Reagan, and it took a good 15 or so years to get past that issue. What was the next issue that they embraced? It was abortion. Because there was a lot of religious folks in the South, and the pro-life folks said, hey, you know what? Our party is clearly the Republican Party. And so that's what really started. I mean, if you look at, let's see, you had Nixon was voted Republican, and he took the South. But then what happened after Nixon? There was Ford, right? I mean, the next elected president was Carter, who was a Southern Democrat,
Right.
and by no means a racist. There's nobody that thinks that, he embraced the racist part of the Democratic Party. So anyway, the idea of left and right and conservative and liberal just has no meaning anymore. And there's nobody who was ever paying attention to the County Board of Supervisors in San Diego thought that those 5 people that serve, Bill Horn, Ron Roberts, Pam Slater-Price, Greg Cox, that was a conservative board. It just wasn't. It just wasn't. People started paying attention during COVID, and they don't really. I don't think people take the time to sit down and kind of think through these complicated issues, and don't really think about what fundamentally makes somebody a conservative, what fundamentally makes somebody a liberal, and there were a lot of indicators that San Diego was turning Democrat, was going further to the left. People were moving in, and there was kind of a younger demographic, and the military was kind of moving out. There were far less of an influence. But I don't even think it was Nathan Fletcher that was indicating this big change. There was a guy named Dave Roberts right before him, that had some major problems. He had some personal friend. There was kind of weren't quite sure what the relationship was, and he hired this person to be his personal driver, and that was a big controversy. He was on the county board. He was a one-term guy. They voted him right out, and that was kind of what kicked off this Democrat leadership. And then there was Bob Filner, who won as San Diego mayor, and that was an indicator that things. But one thing that they continue to have in common, and I think that the Republicans are right to emphasize this, is the fact that all these Democrats are getting kicked out of office. Dave Roberts got kicked out of office because of a controversy, because of a fiscal controversy. Bob Filner, sexual harassment. Nathan Fletcher, sexual harassment. Nora Vargas, who knows what's going on?
There's something.
Something's going on. She didn't get kicked out.
Security and safety, right?
Yeah, right. But you're seeing a lot of these folks get kicked out of office. And I think that the Republicans strategically would be wise to say, hey, look, you guys told us, or the Democrats told us that if you put them in power, that things will be better. And they simply aren't. They can't even stay in office, let alone fill a pothole, let alone figure out what's going on with the drug and homeless problem. So anyway, all right. So let's move on. Anything you guys want to add to that?
No.
Okay.
That's a lot.
Yeah. I think it's out there.
Well, one of the things that I think it's important to mention to the folks that are listening is like, why should gun owners care about who's on the board of supervisors, right? And just remind people, it's like,
sure.
How's it going to affect, the lives of gun owners?
Sure. So we want a pro Second Amendment majority. We want at least 3 people, that are reasonable on the Second Amendment, that's not what we have now. Because they do a lot of things. There are a lot of, in the unincorporated areas, there are a lot of gun ranges, but they also pass laws for the unincorporated areas, like storage laws they've passed. They were the ones that have basically made it impossible for people in San Diego to home manufacture a firearm for their own personal use. So there's a lot of things that they have influence on that directly impact gun owners. The other thing is, so they're butting heads with the sheriff right now, and they don't set policy. But one thing that they do is the county gives the sheriff their budget. So the sheriff doesn't collect taxes. The county board collects taxes, and they say, all right, sheriff, how much money do you need and what do you need it for? And then they decide how much to give her. Right now, it's taken 8 months. It's down from 1.5 years, but it's taken 8 months to get your CCW. If you have 3,
if they cut the budget.
Right? And they don't they have the ability to go down to each line item and say, no, we're not giving $1 million for this. We'll give you, everything else, but we're not giving you what you need for this particular line item, like, CCWs. And suing for that, good luck. I mean, it's not, I'm not saying it's impossible, but so the real solution is getting people into office who are at the very least not anti-Second Amendment. Like if they could just not be horrible to gun owners, that'd be something. So that'd
be progress.
That'd be progress.
Yeah.
That would be progressive.